Hi folks, Ariel over here at Nyth, where today I am making sauerkraut. If you're hearing simmering in the background, I do actually have a pot of Danish Christmas cabbage going over here. This is the bright purple stuff. I did a video on how to make that last fall. Just Google Nyth Christmas cabbage and you can pull that up if you want to make that. But if you're hearing simmering, that's what's going on there. This video is not about that. What I am doing is making just a traditional basic sauerkraut recipe. This would probably be from like a German background. A good bit of my family heritage is German from a long time ago. The majority of my family's been over here in the new country since before it was called America. Anyway, this is, I think, one of the simplest and most basic and easy ways to start fermenting, if that is something you want to do. If you have never tried that and are wondering why would I want to do that, many reasons. For one, I think it tastes delicious. I love fermented and pickled things. I just really enjoy the flavor. Two, it is an excellent source of good bacteria. These days it seems like every day somebody's coming out with a new study about how we're finally learning about that, you know, not just that bacteria and microscopic things exist and can be pathogenic, but that they exist and a whole lot of them are beneficial and actually involved in regulating healthy skin and healthy food digestion and brain health and all that kind of stuff. So having a healthy microbiome, the culture of the little critters in your guts, is very important, and fermented foods seem to be very helpful with that because they are full of those little invisible bugs. There's about 10 times more of those bugs and bacteria in your body than there are human cells in your body. So one way you could look at humans is as just giant structures that carry bacteria around. Anyway, so that's some of the reasons you may want to do this, in addition to it being delicious. So this is cabbage from my garden. I picked it all a couple days ago before it was getting to zero. It was out there, you know, well into the teens, but I knew I needed to get it out of there because once you get into the single digits, you can start to see the very top leaves. This one's actually a little bit limp. Start to get frozen, and you can see they get clear once they've frozen and thawed, and then they will spoil rather quickly. So I didn't want all of my cabbage to freeze. So anyway, brought it in, and now I'm getting it used up and preserved in ways that will let me eat this through the winter. So the Danish Christmas cabbage over there I'm going to be canning because that's a hot product, and that's an easy way to preserve that to eat through the year. This I am going to be fermenting. So what I had in that bowl originally was 1 full head of cabbage with some salt. This is a super simple recipe, 2 ingredients, cabbage and salt. You can make similar ferments with all kinds of veggies. You can do combos of veggies. You could add carrots to this. You could add beets to this. You could do anything you want. That is fine. I tend to like a basic sauerkraut. I'm just one of those people that doesn't like all of my stuff mixed. Like if you give me a trail mix, I'll eat all the raisins, and then all the almonds, and then all of the chocolate chips, you know, whatever it is. I just don't personally prefer my things mixed, so that's why I tend to make dishes that are more one item at a time, but that's just a personal preference thing. And you could certainly make something more like a chow chow. That's another good Pennsylvania Dutch dish that was made with kind of a mixture of everything that came out of the garden at the end of the year. So lots of options here, but this one is just cabbage and salt. Now the salt is very important to the fermentation process because, for one, it's going to keep bacteria that we don't want from growing in there. A lot of bad bacteria do not grow in salt. A lot of the helpful ones can handle a pretty salty environment, so that's very convenient for our purposes here. And it's overall preserved. You can do lacto ferments starting with whey instead of salt, I believe. I've never done that. I don't have a good access here for whey, but if that's something that interests you more than using the salt, feel free to look that up. There's tons of people online with excellent directions for various ways to make this. So if you want to try that version, check out somebody with directions for that. So that's 2 heads of cabbage. You can see that bowl is pretty full. I'm doing about an 1/8 of a cup of salt per head. That seems to work pretty well for me. That's a 1/4 cup measuring cup but I don't have a 1/8 cup one, so I'm just doing half of that as a convenient scoop. Gonna let that salt sit in there, and that's going to start to draw moisture, water out of the cabbage leaves while I cut up the rest of this. This one I wanted to show you guys. You see how it's split right here? I only had 2 heads, I think, of my, what did I have, 24 heads that did this. That is just, it's basically a stretch mark. It's where the outside leaves had gotten to their size, and then whatever happened, like we got a lot of rain, which we did. We got 3 inches in 2 days earlier in the fall, and 3 inches is like our normal whole year's worth of precipitation, or normal whole summer's worth of rain. Obviously we get a lot of snow, but that's a lot of moisture, and basically the inside core grew so fast it split the outside. It's basically just a stretch mark on your cabbage. Does not hurt anything, will not keep as long though, just because it's a damage to the nicely sealed layers. So if you were going to be storing cabbage either in a fridge or in a root cellar or something for a while, you would want to use any heads like that up first, just because they won't keep as long. But otherwise, nothing at all wrong with it. One thing to note here, and why I don't put the hearts in, though you could if you wanted to shred them smaller when I am making sauerkraut, is I want this to all ferment at about the same pace. Now this doesn't have to be specific, but if I put in one solid, that heart is really solid, one solid chunk of cabbage like that, and one little leaf like this, either this will not be fermented when this is done, or this will be like a mush long before this would get adequately kind of digested by those little microbes. So I am making some effort as I'm cutting it up here to keep similar sized chunks. Again, this does not have to be precise, but do think about that a little bit. You want similar sized chunks, kind of like with canning, to get a somewhat even process going on in your batch of sauerkraut. I'm actually going to hold off on stuffing that in there because I'm going to run out of space in my bowl. When you're canning and processing veggies and such, bigger stainless steel bowls are always a good thing. Now, I got a band-aid on my finger because I've got a little scratch, and if you put a scratch in salt, as you probably know, it will hurt. So that's just to protect that. What I'm going to do is just take my hands and start kind of massaging this cabbage. I'm kind of breaking the cell structure of the leaves just a little bit by crushing them and getting that salt worked into them. And my hands are going to start getting really wet here in a minute because that is going to start drawing water out of the cabbage. It doesn't look like much right now, but in an hour or so, there's going to be enough liquid to completely submerge all of this cabbage, believe it or not. And that's all coming from the cabbage itself. I am not adding any kind of water. So if you got little kids in the house, this was always like the littlest person's job. You can just get your workout for the day. Way better than using those shake-a-weights or whatever people advertised for a while for working your arm muscles, and just give your cabbage leaves a massage. So I'm going to do that to start shrinking the amount of volume here in my bowl so I can get my third head into here. You can also add quite a variety of seasonings if you do not want just the salt and cabbage. Some people want to make it spicy. You could add red pepper. You can do more of a kimchi-like recipe. I really like kimchi. Some of it's a little spicy for me. I'm rather a wimp about spicy things. I've never actually made my own. One of my good friends makes her own, but I never have. But you can, some people like to add different other seasonings like mustard or caraway or fennel or all kinds of things, and if you want to do that, go for it. I really enjoy just the simple cabbage version, so that is what I'm making. But just be aware there are lots and lots of variations if that is not so much your thing. And if you think, at this point you may have already clicked off the video, but if you think I don't like sauerkraut, but you've never made your own or had fresh sauerkraut, if you've only had sauerkraut out of a can from a grocery store, for one, that's heated to a high temperature and that's destroyed most of the beneficial bacteria in it. Two, it does not taste the same. You probably have experienced this if you've ever had like fresh peas and canned peas, and you know they do not taste the same flavor at all. And canned sauerkraut versus a freshly lacto-fermented sauerkraut are very different flavors. And so just want to encourage you, if you think you don't like it, be maybe willing to give one a shot. And if you do, I mean, in that case, don't start probably with making 3 full heads of cabbage into sauerkraut, but maybe try one or half of one, or even go to your grocery store and look, not in the canned food section, but if you've got one that's got like a health food section, or, and that term's always made me stop and think, if there's a health food section in the grocery store, what's the rest of the aisles? The death food section? Anyway, go look in the health food section or the refrigerated section, and you can probably find a fresh sauerkraut of various flavors and various brands. Maybe give that a try and see if you do like that, in case you think you do not like sauerkraut. Now you can kind of see how the leaves here are already turning a brighter green from the salt and the crushing, and how much my heap in this bowl has shrunken already. And also it's dissolving the salt. I'm not feeling the individual grains of salt anymore in my fingers. It's all being dissolved by the liquid. And there's just a tiny bit of moisture there in the bottom right now. That's just going to continue to grow. So I'm going to call that good. Now I have room to stack more leaves on there, and there you can kind of, looking down, see the difference between the bruised leaves and the freshly sliced leaves, and how the color and texture starts to look different. Now there are multiple ways to ferment this once you have this part done. I'm going to do 2 different versions here. I'm going to do a big batch in a crock, but I don't think all of this is going to fit in my crock. So I'm also going to do at least 1 quart jar version to have some a little faster in a smaller batch. And if you are new to doing this and want to do a smaller batch, that is probably the easiest way to go. You can ferment a whole lot of things in just a regular, like, glass mason jar. And I've got something called a fermentation weight, and a special little, like, nipple-shaped lid that's going to allow the gas that those bacteria make as they're working to vent, so they don't blow up a jar. I'll show that to you guys in a minute. But if you're ever looking for those or any of the other supplies I talk about pretty much here, almost everything that I have, unless it's a antique, is linked under Amazon.com/Nyth, and try to kind of sort things into categories of kitchen stuff or house stuff or whatever. So go look up there if you're looking for a fermentation weight and nipple like that. There's a very popular company called Pickle Pebbles that does them. The only reason I don't like them is they only make their nipples in lots of bright colors. And I'm just not a lots of bright colors person. I don't want pink and purple and red and green things in my kitchen utensil repertoire. So I found another company that makes pure white ones, which I like better. That's just a personal preference thing. As far as I know, they operate exactly the same, and I don't think there is any issue at all there. That's just my personal aesthetic preference. Now you can see I've got a whole nother head of cabbage in here, and it's only piled back up to about where it was before I started crushing my first 2 heads. And I've got little cabbage crumbs that go everywhere when you're cutting this much. I'm going to add another 1/8 of a cup of salt. Go. And this is Redmond Real. You do not need to use a canning and pickling salt. It is recommended you don't use one with iodine in it, but I highly recommend, of course, getting a real salt with all the minerals in it in the first place for everything you do. But that's the same thing I use for cooking. I use for canning, pickling, fermenting. So we're going to just mash this last head just a little bit, and then what we can start doing, got this cool fermentation crock. I guess I better make some space on my countertop before I start my next step here. So let's move all this. Okay. So looking down, you can see how this has got like a moat and then a hole in the center, and that is going to let us make a watertight seal on our whole crock here of cabbage as it ferments, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. But I can start taking little bits of this and filling up this crock. You can also use just a plain like wide open crock without that seal. You can still create a water seal with that, and that's actually always how I did it growing up, because we do 5-gallon crocks of sauerkraut at a time. That's not hard, but I do have this little one. I'm generally doing smaller batches here, so I'm just mashing that up in there where I've got some more room. Take some more handfuls and continue to fill this up. Clean up our little moat there from whatever I spill in it in a minute. It's kind of hard to put irregular shaped leaves in there without getting some in it. Okay, I've got that jar of the crock partially full, and I'm just letting that cabbage sit for a second because I'm going to mash it just a little more once that salt starts to draw more moisture. But the bottom half of the bowl that we'd already mashed is already doing that. The texture starts to feel different. It's less crispy and I guess not really mushy, but you can just feel it's kind of bruised at this point. And I'm starting to feel a lot of moisture now that the salt has sat in there for a few more minutes. One thing to note when you're doing this, we are working with, cooperating with bacteria to get them to do a job for us, but there are good and bad bacterias, and so to avoid having an overexplosion of the bad ones, it's a good idea to make sure your hands are clean, your stainless steel bowl is clean, all that kind of basic common sense stuff before you start your crock is clean, all of that. Now let's see here. You can start to see here in the very bottom of the bowl how I've got a puddle of liquid. Again, that's all come from the cabbage. I have not added any moisture at all, other than what the salt is drawing out of the leaves themselves. And that, again, will continue to extend till this whole batch is completely submerged in its own cabbage juice. But because I know it's not all going to go in there, let's grab my clean mason jar here and show you how to do just a little batch. This is easier to see because it's glass instead of solid like the crock. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing. Take my crushed salty leaves, push them in here. We want to pack it down good, because we don't want air spaces in there. We're going to get rid of the air spaces anyway once the juice starts to fill that in, but we want to make it as easy as possible for the cabbage to do that. So I'm going to pack it good after I put each handful in and compress it down thoroughly. You can probably see if the camera's showing it well enough. As I press there now, the juice starting to bubble up. Now I'm not going to go the whole way to the brim, so I'm probably going to stop right about there with that pretty well compacted. And already my liquid level's about up to here, and that will continue to grow. And I'm going to grab this stuff. This is my little glass pickle pebble. I think that's a brand name, but it's the same thing. It's a glass fermentation weight designed to fit these jars. Plops right in there. That helps hold the leaves all down under the water so nothing floats up to the surface. Then this is my little nipple, and this works like the nipple in a bottle. There's a tiny little hole right there in the center that when something is pressurized inside, it can let out a bubble of gas, but then it seals again so that other things from the outside, dust and dirt or dog hair or whatever, don't get in. And I'm just going to screw it on there. Now, if you see this over the next couple of days, if you see that nipple start to bubble up, just give it a pinch. Sometimes with sauerkraut, because of the salt in there, the salt can bubble into there just a little bit and almost corrode it shut as it recrystallizes, and then it gets stuck and can't vent. So if you see this starting to bulge, just give it a pinch. If you don't have a nipple like that, you can do this with just a regular lid. Then you would want to just leave it loose, and every day or so burp it like that so that you don't blow your jar up. That's why I think it's easier to do with this little nipple. So that's all I'm going to do there. I'll show you one more time here. If I push on this, I can see juice bubbling clear up to here right now. I don't know if you guys can see those bubbles. You can see that line of liquid, and over just the next hour or so, that line of liquid's going to come up till we've got liquid up here and all the leaves are under the water. About a day later, I wanted to show you how this is. It's just slightly firm. It's bubbled up just a tiny bit there. You can almost, I don't know if the camera can see. You can see the little nipple vent there. When you let the pressure off, then it's a little more spongy. But also I wanted to show you the liquid level. You can probably see, and you don't need to take this lid off, but I just want to be able to push in here. See all the bubbles there and how the liquid line is clear up here on top of my glass puck. If I push it down there, it squishes even more bubbles out. It will continue to bubble down here as the bacteria does its work, so that is perfectly normal. You'll see little air bubbles here, and over time they'll make their way up to the top. But you can see how, again, with no water added at all, that's just the liquid from the cabbage juice, how it has filled up, you know, to the top there, and will continue to actually get more water for probably the next day or so, and then it kind of stops drawing water from the cabbage. Now this is just going to sit on the counter for a couple days, 3-4 days, in kind of a cool place. So I'm going to put it back over here just because that's away from my wood stove, the wood stove right here being the hottest place in the house. And then you can either continue to let it sit out or put it in a fridge if you want it to go a little bit slower. And in about 2 weeks, that'll be ready to eat. You can let it go a little longer, a little shorter, depending on your temperatures, how crispy or sour you like your cabbage. You can start tasting it, and it should be fine, even if it gets a scummy look on the surface. That's true for either of these methods of doing this. Unless you see like fuzzy mold, then you don't want that on the surface. And if you start out with everything clean, that should not happen. If it's fuzzy mold on the surface of the water itself and all of your leaves are still under there, you can just skim it off. That is just fine. It is not going to hurt anything because the cabbage is still sealed by the liquid. If you've got fuzzy mold on any part of your ferment, and this is true not just for cabbage, but for fermenting in general, that might be a batch you want to discard. I have not had a problem with this. I just know that it's possible. So I'm just giving this head that's in here another squish. And you can feel the liquid in there. I'm sure you can't see in there because of the dark crock. Now look how much water is in the bottom of this bowl already from this continuing to sit. So we're just going to fill the rest of this up. And I know in some places with cold climates, they did ferments with whole cabbage heads even, like a very long, slow, like big pit in the ground, put in the whole heads of cabbage, pour salt all over it, and let the whole thing ferment like that. I do not have a fermenting operation on that scale going on here. Just one little crock. So I'm going to grab all of my bits of cabbage, all of my liquid, pour that in there. Pack this down. I could actually get a little more in there, but I'm going to show you how this works. This crock comes with its own weights as well, like this. These are made of stone, and the reason they're split in half is so you can get them through this hole. So you kind of have to put them in one at a time, and wiggle it around just a little bit, and line that up, and then put the other one on the other side, and do that. And they're doing the same thing as that glass weight. They're holding the cabbage down so the leaves stay submerged under the water. Then this lid sits on there, and then this is not adding to the cabbage because remember we've got this moat here, but we're going to fill up our little moat with some water. just like that. And now I've got a airtight seal because the air is not going to go through the water. Now this can sit wherever. This being a bigger batch, I'm probably going to let it sit for about 3 weeks. It can sit anywhere in your house. If you look in here in like an hour or so, again, that liquid should be up, completely submerging the cabbage inside there. And it's helpful to keep it in a somewhat cool place. So I'm not going to set it right beside the wood stove. Probably going to put it over in that end of the kitchen because that's kind of the coolest spot, being furthest from the stove. If you have like a root cellar or even an unheated garage that's not going to freeze solid, those would be excellent places to keep it sitting. And occasionally you'll start to see little bubbles come out into our water moat there, as the gases can bubble their way out from the inside, but again, dirt and bacteria from the outside cannot get in there. Now if you've got a very dry climate, you may want to check every now and then. You might have to add a little water just to keep your moat sealed. If that starts to evaporate, if you've got a cool, damp climate, you may never need to add any at all. But that's something just to check on, just to keep your moat sealed. And then about 3 weeks, this is going to be ready to eat. And you could eat it, you could let it ferment longer. If you keep going longer, it doesn't go bad, it just gets more sour and more mushy as the texture of the leaves starts to break down further. You can freeze it, you can eat it all on the spot, you could can it, but again, that preserves some of the flavor, but you lose a lot of the healthful benefits of the bacteria. So, if you're going to start and just try fermenting something for the first time, I recommend going with a single jar like we did there and just see how it goes. Not a very scary experiment. And if you like it a lot and want to do a bunch, or have a lot of your own cabbage heads out of your own garden or something, or a great local farmer's market or somewhere to access them inexpensively while they're in season, maybe you want to consider some kind of crock or bigger batch, or of course you could do 15 different quart jars. That would be fine as well. So hopefully that answers questions about making sauerkraut. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you were here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.